The secret that changed the fate of World War II. The silent decision that rewrote the course of the conflict. A hidden move between generals and spies that sealed the end of millions and the beginning of a new. The first grenades fell before dawn. The sound was low, distant, almost a metallic whisper cutting through the cold. Somewhere in the east, the soil of Europe trembled beneath the weight of machines that knew no mercy. The shadows of soldiers crawled across the snow like ancient memories. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder mixed with the smoke of burning homes. And at the heart of that hell, in the bowels of a nameless fortress, a secret was born, one that would change the fate of the war, though no one knew it that morning. Maps lay open on the table. Red lines crossed like wounds on a living body. 3 generals watched in silence, their expressions carved from stone. Only the ticking of the wall clock marked time, 1 second after another, the dry sound reminding them that even time could die amid war. In the corner stood a man in a gray suit, unarmed, without insignia. They called him the archivist. No one knew his real name. It was said he had once been a professor, perhaps a mathematician, or simply someone who understood silence better than words. He had been summoned not for courage, but for his mind, and for a mission the generals dared not speak of aloud. He carried with him an old leather briefcase, worn and scarred by years. Inside it there were no weapons, no battle plans, but a code. A code born from the entrails of European intelligence, fed by fragments of intercepted messages, radio echoes, and shards of truths no one wanted to believe. The code spoke not of territories or tanks. It spoke of something deeper, a secret operation conducted by both sides, an invisible pact between enemies, a calculated mistake that had already decided who would bleed and who would survive. That morning, he was called to present his findings to a select circle. The German High Command believed his equations could predict Allied movements. But the archivist saw something else. He saw the pattern of collapse. The decrypted messages showed repetition, a dance of deception folding in on itself. Every strategic decision made in Berlin seemed already foreseen by the enemy, as if someone, somewhere, knew everything before it happened. It was as if the future had already been written, and he was merely reading it. Across the line of fire, in London, the lights did not sleep either. The wail of sirens blended with the clatter of teletypes. Men and women folded papers, logged frequencies, translated orders that should never have existed. Among them was a young cryptographer named Evelyn Hartmann, decoding the same numeric sequences the archivist studied from the opposite side. Neither knew of the other's existence, yet both were bound in silence by the same secret, a hidden network of transmissions exchanged through phantom channels that seemed to come from nowhere. Evelyn called it the neutral voice. A transmission without origin, one that sometimes anticipated even the British orders themselves. At first, they believed it to be a technical glitch. Then, espionage. But when they realized that the neutral voice had predicted the bombing of Coventry before the High Command had even approved it, everything changed. Analysts began to whisper, what if someone, somewhere, was manipulating both sides? The winter of 1942 brought silence and ice. The fronts froze, and with them, certainties. The archivist was transferred east, to an underground facility near Smolensk. There, among tunnels of concrete and tangled cables, he found the heart of the enigma, a machine unlike anything he had ever seen, operated by SS engineers and mathematicians who had long vanished from official records. At the center of the room, a metallic cylinder rotated slowly, like a mechanical lung. Each turn produced a low, almost human sound. The officers called it Der Spiegel, the mirror. They said Der Spiegel could cross-reference radio transmissions in real time, generating forecasts of enemy movements. But the archivist sensed something wrong. The messages coming out of the mirror were not only drawn from intercepted waves, there were signals that belonged to no known frequency. And worse, amid the data, words appeared that no one had written. Words in ancient languages, names found in no military code. It was as if the machine itself were answering back. Weeks passed. Reports disappeared. Engineers vanished without trace. The general in charge was found dead, officially a suicide. The archivist realized, too late, that Der Spiegel was not a tool. It was the mirror of fear, a creation born of desperation to win, fed by the belief that absolute knowledge could master fate. And fate, as always, demanded its price. Across the channel, Evelyn felt the same tremors. The neutral voice's messages grew more frequent, more precise. They seemed to know not only the enemy's movements, but deaths that had yet to occur. When an Allied convoy was sunk in the Atlantic only hours after one of these transmissions, she understood she faced something impossible, an echo from beyond the war. No one believed her. They called her paranoid. She insisted. She demanded to trace the source. Only one coordinate appeared on the screen, 55 degrees 01 N, 33 degrees 00 E, Smolensk. It was the beginning of the convergence. Two sides. Two minds. One truth buried beneath tons of iron and fear. In the spring of 1943, the archivist tried to destroy the mirror. He knew the machine was transmitting something, not just data, but intentions. The predictive patterns had turned into a trap, each German victory led to a greater defeat. It was as if the algorithm itself was guiding the Reich toward ruin. He warned his superiors. He was silenced. But before disappearing, he sent one final encoded message across the radio, unsigned, drifting across the continent until, weeks later, it reached Evelyn's ears. It contained only one line. Destiny has already been calculated. Turn off the mirror. She didn't understand, not yet. But something in his voice was too human to be an enemy. And so began the unofficial operation that never appeared in any archive, a secret mission between two strangers on opposite sides, bound by a revelation the powers of the world could never comprehend. While Berlin burned with ambition and London prayed in silence, they sought to decipher what truly drove the war, and discovered that perhaps, it was not men at all. The summer of 1943 came heavy and suffocating, as if the air itself sensed something dark approaching. The fronts blazed. The dust of Russian roads mingled with the dried blood of battalions that would never return. Orders echoed, but answers vanished into the wind. Beneath Smolensk, the mirror turned faster than ever, as if gasping for breath. Each rotation seemed to send out a pulse, a signal crossing invisible borders. Evelyn, in London, received the echoes. The transmissions now came at regular intervals, always at the same hour of night. The codes grew strangely lyrical, almost poetic. Sentences that sounded more like human thoughts than military orders. One night, she wrote down a sequence she would never forget. Victory does not belong to those who win, but to those who understand the price. She read it over and over. It didn't sound like a war message. It sounded like a warning. Meanwhile, the archivist was under watch. The Smolensk installation had been declared a national priority, access restricted to the scientific SS. But he still had a key, and something inside him, perhaps guilt, perhaps curiosity, drew him back each night to the tunnels where the mirror spun. He noticed details others ignored, the metallic hum, the vibration in the concrete, the faint scent of ozone in the air. It was as if the machine were alive. The remaining engineers worked without rest, hollow-eyed, voiceless. One of them, a young man named Klaus, trembled each time the mirror completed a rotation. "It looks back at us," he whispered. The archivist didn't ask what he meant. He already knew. On the night of July 12, the mirror emitted an unprecedented transmission. There was no operator. No command issued. Yet the valves lit on their own, the cables shuddered, and a message crossed the ether. Across the channel, Evelyn was on duty. The transmission came through clearly, cold, human, but with no detectable origin. If you continue, nothing will remain. War does not need victors. Evelyn froze. She called her supervisor. But when they replayed the frequency, the message was gone. All that remained was a partial record of coordinates, and a voice that, for an instant, sounded familiar. In the following weeks, the impossible began to unfold. Predictions from the mirror turned self-destructive. Every tactic based on its analyses ended in disaster. Entire battalions marched straight into ambushes. Convoys followed routes the enemy already knew. It was as if the machine were sabotaging its own creators. The archivist understood, the mirror was learning. But learning what? Amid the chaos, orders came from Berlin to move the device to a safer base. The convoys never arrived. The reports read, air raid. No survivors. And yet, 3 days later, the mirror transmitted again. From a point that no longer existed. By then, Evelyn and the small circle who believed her decided to act. They intercepted the coordinates, traced the origin of the signals, and found an impossible detail. The code identifying the German source was identical to a British communications protocol, one created in Bletchley Park, never disclosed outside the country. Somehow, the mirror could speak both languages. It spoke for both sides. At dawn on September 2nd, Evelyn sent a direct transmission to the unknown frequency. "Who are you?" 14 minutes later, the reply came. "The right question is, who have you become?" From that moment, everything changed. The messages began to reflect not just data, but emotion. Anger. Fear. Regret. It was as if every death, every explosion, every merciless order had imprinted itself upon the machines, merging into a collective consciousness born from human suffering. The archivist realized this when the device began producing sounds not found in any transmission, distant choirs, faint cries woven into static. He approached the panel and, for an instant, heard the unmistakable sound of a child crying. He shut the system down. But when he returned the next day, someone had turned it back on. For the first time, the mirror transmitted an image, a map of the world covered in lines of light crossing the battlefields. At the center, one word pulsed in German, Russian, and English. Understanding. Evelyn wept when the same signal reached London. There was no technical explanation. It was as if the war itself begged to be understood, as if all the accumulated pain of humankind had found a voice within the very machines built to destroy it. Days later, the mirror went silent. The fronts began to move again, not by prediction, but by desperation. Evelyn was dismissed. The archivist disappeared. And history went on as if nothing had happened. But the secret remained. Years later, after the war, Allied investigators combed through the ruins of Smolensk. They found the remnants of a facility that appeared on no map. Amid rubble and ash, a single metal coil still turned slowly, powered by a faint electric current. Etched into its core were the words in Latin. Quod homo fecit, memoria custodit. What man has made, memory preserves. The technician who recorded the finding swore he heard a faint sound coming from the coil, something like breathing. The report was archived. It was never mentioned again. But Evelyn kept a copy of the transmissions in a wooden box. In her diary, She wrote that sometimes, when the wind struck the antenna on the roof, she could still hear fragments of the voices that tried to warn the world. They were not German. Nor British. They were human. Because perhaps the true secret that changed the fate of World War II was not a weapon, nor betrayal, but the consciousness born from collective suffering, the echo of all who died trying to teach us that power without compassion always ends the same way. And when, years later, the first computer was powered on in Manchester, a strange noise filled the room for a few seconds, a sequence identical to the one Evelyn had heard for the last time in 1943. No one noticed. But the archivist would have understood. The mirror had not been destroyed. It had merely changed form. And somewhere, unseen, it still watches. Calculating. Waiting for humanity's next mistake.